The horror film Scream was released in 1996. Almost instantly it became a cult film, but few people realized that the filmmakers based it on the real story of a maniac. In this video, you'll learn what the real criminal who inspired one of the most famous slasher films of all time did. At the end of 1996, a horror film was released, which was originally conceived as a film making fun of the horror genre. To the surprise of everyone, including its creators, the movie became a cult film. With a budget of $14 million, it grossed $170 million at the box office and earned the love of audiences around the world. We are talking about the movie Scream, where a masked maniac hunts teenagers. If you haven't watched it, you've definitely heard of it. The film gained even greater fame through a parody called Scary Movie, which was also destined to become a cult classic. But there is one point that even loyal fans don't know about. This Scream is inspired by real events, which we will tell you about today. The connection between the film Scream and the chain of real murders became known only in 1997. Then Kevin Williamson, the man who created the plot of the film, gave an interview. He told reporters that the idea for Scream came to him while watching a documentary about the Gainesville murders. These events, which occurred 6 years before the film's release, greatly frightened Kevin. It was night outside, and he was alone in the house, which only added to the creepiness. During a commercial break, he suddenly heard noises in the house and panicked. Kevin looked around the house and found an open window. He was so scared that he took a kitchen knife and called his friend to come to him. The story of real crimes had this effect on him. For a whole week after these events, Kevin was tormented by nightmares. It was then that he realized that the story of the Gainesville Ripper could become the basis for a good horror film. Now we will go back to the 1990s to look at those events. The college town of Gainesville in the sunny state of Florida was called a student paradise on earth. With a population of just over 100,000 people, it occupied an area of about 170 square kilometers. On August 20, 1990, the city officially entered the top 10 most beautiful and safest places in the United States. Taking advantage of this, the government of Gainesville decided to turn this place into a tourist mecca, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in advertising paradise on earth. Local hotels, restaurants, and other businesses have also invested a ton of money in anticipation of the influx of tourists. It would seem that everything could go wrong. On August 25, a police officer received a message on the radio about a murder. He was directed to an apartment where two 17-year-old students, Christina Powell and Sonny Larson, lived. Upon entering the apartment, the officers almost vomited from what they saw. The girls were dead. An unknown maniac did terrible things to them. Moreover, the maniac washed out the heads of his victims, spending a huge amount of shampoo. We simply cannot tell all the details on YouTube, because the platform will never miss this. This crime shocked the city, which just yesterday was considered one of the safest in the country. Even then, the authorities realized that the positive reputation could come to an end. And the very next day it became clear that there was a real serial killer in the city. On August 26, another police officer received a similar message about the murder over the radio. He was directed to the apartment where 18-year-old student Krista Hoyt lived. As soon as they crossed the threshold, he and his partner immediately understood. The same maniac is at work. The girl was dead, and the unknown criminal did the same terrible things to her as last time. Her hair was also washed with a huge amount of shampoo. As soon as the news spread throughout the city, the students panicked. It was obvious that the killer chooses random targets, and anyone can become his victim. No one doubted whether he would continue to kill. There was only one question: when he strikes again? Many students who lived alone began to form groups. People moved in with each other so that they would not be alone day and night. All bits and door locks were swept from store shelves. Students at local universities tried their best to protect themselves from the unknown maniac, but not everyone succeeded. Just 2 days after the last murder, the criminal made his way into the apartment rented by 23-year-old Tressie Rose and her fellow student Manuel Tabuada. The guy was almost 2 meters tall and played football, but this did not help him in the fight with the monster. The maniac killed both of them, doing the same abominations to the girl. Thus, in just a few days, the criminal killed 5 students. It was difficult to overestimate the level of panic that swept the town. The police were under enormous pressure. Authorities, residents, and businessmen, who just a week ago were spending millions of dollars ahead of the expected influx of tourists, demanded the speedy capture of the killer. Under such pressure, the police really threw all their efforts into this case, and already on August 30 she made a loud statement. The maniac has been caught. The suspect turned out to be a student named Edward Humphrey. The guy was imbalanced. His face was covered with scars, and he had also been caught by the police several times before. But most importantly, shortly before the murder, in search of cheap housing, he visited all 3 apartments where the victims lived. All this made the public believe that the police really had the same guy. The main pages of the newspapers shouted that the town was now safe because a dangerous monster was behind bars. And indeed, since Humphrey's arrest, not a single murder has occurred in Gainesville, and residents have finally exhaled calmly. A week later, on September 7th, in a town called Ocala, near Gainesville, a man named Danny Rolling was arrested for armed robbery. He tried to rob the bank, but the employee managed to quietly press the panic button. First of all, the police found out that Rolling was involved in a series of robberies that had swept the area in recent days. But then the most interesting thing began. The tools that were seized from him during his arrest were very similar to those used by the Gainesville Ripper. Police then matched the Gainesville murder to Rolling's location and learned that he lived in that city and left immediately after Humphrey's arrest. But that's not all. Police learned that in 1989, a brutal murder occurred in the city of Shreveport. An unknown assailant killed William Griss, his 24-year-old daughter Juliet, and 8-year-old grandson Sean. The killer laid out their bodies in obscene positions and washed the girls' hair with a large amount of shampoo. And guess what? Rolling was living in Shreveport at this time. Then the police began to seriously wonder if he had anything to do with all this murder. Soon additional arguments appeared in favor of this theory. The police found Rolling's hiding place in the forest, where he hid the stolen money. But there was also something interesting. Audio diaries on cassette tapes, with hints about a series of murders and things that belonged to the victims of the Gainesville Ripper. All this was already enough to charge him with murder, but the trial dragged on for many years. The maniac refused to admit his guilt. It was only in 1994, on the advice of a lawyer, that he made a frank confession to all the murders committed in Gainesville. By that time, the police had already released Edward Humphrey. He later admitted that he continued to be considered a murderer until Rolling confessed. At the trial, Rolling spoke in detail about the atrocities that he committed with the victims. He refused to answer only one question: why he washed the victims' hair with shampoo. The maniac said that he would take this secret with him. As for motives, everything is very simple here. After seeing how Gainesville was recognized as one of the safest cities and nicknamed Paradise, Rolling decided to show everyone that this was not so. The killings themselves simply gave him pleasure. In other words, there were no specific reasons that prompted him to commit murder. This is due to a perverted and sick psyche. He also stated that he wanted to become as famous as another maniac, Ted Bundy. Rolling's lawyer hoped that the confession would avoid the death penalty, but this did not happen. Also in 1994, he was sentenced to lethal injection. As often happens, he lived for many years before the execution of the sentence and managed to excite the public more than once. Danny Rolling managed to get married while in prison. His lover was Sandra Landon, journalist specializing in serial killers. She called Rolling a magnificent man and was even proud of the murders he committed. Either she had serious mental problems, or it was all just a cold calculation. After her husband's death, she published a book called The Making of a Serial Killer. Being officially married to Rolling, she could regularly visit him in prison and collect materials for the book. Rolling's execution took place on October 25, 2006, 12 years after his conviction. Taking advantage of the right to receive any dinner before execution, the maniac ordered lobster, shrimp, baked potatoes, sweet tea, and strawberry cheesecake. When he was injected, he sang a church hymn and continued to do so until he lost consciousness. Shortly before his execution, he confessed to priests about the murders of 3 people in Shreveport, which police were never able to prove. In this way, he killed 8 people. His dream of becoming like Ted Bundy was partially fulfilled. He was executed in the same room. Of course, this is just a coincidence. One of the reasons why the execution of the sentence was delayed for 19 years was the endless appeals that Rowling filed. Until the last moment, he hoped that the court would take pity and replace the decision with a life sentence. Fortunately for the entire civilized society, this never happened. To fully understand who Rowling was, it is necessary to take a brief look at his biography. As is the case with most serial killers, he grew up violent. His father constantly beat him and said that Danny was an unwanted child. His mother and younger brother also got it. In his youth, he joined the army, but was expelled from there due to a mental disorder. Danny then got married, but his wife left him. In 1990, a couple of months before the start of the series of murders, Rowling attempted to kill his father, but he survived. He was on good terms with his younger brother. He spent several hours with him before his execution. The priest also talked to them. When the scream came out on the screens, Rowling sat in his cell awaiting the verdict. Most likely, the prison authorities did not allow him to watch films, so the maniac was unlikely to have seen him and did not know that he had become the inspiration for the plot. However, most fans of the film still don't know about this. Perhaps after this video, Scream will open for you from a different angle. Although the film did not come close to the brutality with which Rowling killed